Well, I'll just preface this by saying that we're in a time period in Earth's history that we're going to see the greatest manifestation of evil and the greatest manifestation of God. And I'm thankful to be a part of the work in these last days. You are in the right field, believe me, because there'll be many, many people that are coming and going to come to seek your services. The world is in a crisis, and it just reminds me of the time when we had Jonah in the boat. And you remember when he was asleep, the sailors were in a panic and they were doing their best to try to preserve life. And I feel that in a way that typifies where we're at in history. The church, the prophetic church, like Jonah, is asleep and the world is in a crisis. But soon you see the reverse will happen, whereas Jonah's in a crisis and then the world is at rest. And so we're going to see that change take place, I believe, in a very near future. But being involved in medical mission work will definitely give us an advantage to be able to navigate the situations that are going to be presented to us. And I would say that you're going to have opportunities to labor everywhere. I'm constantly amazed how God just takes nobody like me and gives me influence in all different areas, all different places. That it just is amazing how many people you can reach from high and low, all walks of life, when you have some remedies and help along the way. So I'll just start with what's going on in the situation right now with, I mentioned before about the Ukraine-Russia situation and how that's impacting us on a global scale. And a lot of people don't realize that 12% of the food supply of the world in calories comes from these two countries. So actually 15% of the caloric value that is consumed around the world comes from wheat. And about 30% of the wheat supply is actually exported from Ukraine and Russia. Now, we have, in the world, we have about 90-day supply of food. All right, so if no one was to plant any food from this day forward, the world would run out of food in 90 days. Now, of course, there'd be certain areas that would run out overnight, and there'd be other Western countries that would last a little longer. But what usually happens is when there's really pinching poverty and starvation at hand, you have a bifurcation that takes place, whereas the richer countries buy up more supply and the poorer countries get hit even harder. So when the first world becomes the third world becomes a fourth world. And the fourth world, and what I'm talking about is death. All right, so there's already, according to the World Food Bank president, there's about 270 million people who are currently in a starvation program. 270 million people. All right, so this is extremely dire. We've always had poverty, we've always had hunger, but the thing that's actually pushed this forward and catapulted this to new levels is the COVID lockdowns. And I don't know if any of you have seen just lately what's happening in Shanghai. Now, for those who don't know, Shanghai is one of the most populated cities in the world. It has about 25 million people. And all the people living in Shanghai right now are in prison. They cannot leave their homes. They cannot even open their windows. If they go outside, they will be arrested. They will be sent to camps. They will be heavily dealt with. And the cry of humanity is coming up from everywhere, whether it be Sri Lanka, whether it be Lebanon, whether it be Europe. We just found out today that in Germany, the cost of food, is going up 20 to 50% in the supermarkets. 20 to 50%. All right, so when you put people in pinching poverty and you affect their food supply, it has dramatic effects. There's only so many so much you can withhold financially. You still have to pay your rent. You still have to pay your electric bills. You may not go out so much with gasoline and so on, but there comes a breaking point, and we're reaching these breaking points in different countries around the world, whether it be in Spain right now. Actually, the supermarkets are rationing food supplies. And if you don't think it could happen in America, just turn on the news and look at what's happening in some of our major cities. We have many more homeless that cannot afford to live anymore. A lot of people living in their cars. During the pandemic, which we're still technically in, but when it first came up, the first few months of the pandemic, 1/4 of Americans suffered hunger. 1/4 of Americans suffered hunger. Now, for those who don't know, when we had the Great Depression, right, around 1929, we often think of that date, but actually it progressed to get worse after that to about 1933. We had 8 million Americans die from starvation. All right, now the population was nowhere near what we have today. Around that time, I think it was around about 100 million people. So that's 8% of Americans died. 8% from starvation. All right, now we are heading to a situation. I feel like a doctor telling a patient he's got cancer, five-stage cancer, fifth-stage cancer, because it's so dire, the situation we're in. But I want to leave with some good news as well. I don't want this all to be doom and gloom, but I do believe that there's certain things that we need to do right now to prepare for what's coming, because we only have a short window of time. And I mentioned before about the preparation of food. I know a lot of people they're not even in a position where they can grow their own food. They're not in a financial position to even go in the country right now. But if you can at least get some supplies ahead of time, this can at least give you some grace period. I think maybe what the Lord is going to do with a lot of people is that we're going to have to live in Christian communities where we can help one another. Not necessarily things like communes. We're not going back to communism, but I believe that if God puts you with someone, say, who's got a property, and you can assist them maybe in maintenance or something, or maybe they have a second home, or maybe you can lease some land off them or something like that, where you still have autonomy, but you can function with people that whereby you can help one another. And I think that's where we may be heading. It may actually be forced upon us if we're going to be in a situation where we're going to be able to be more effective. Here in America, we're pretty independent people, and sometimes we don't even know who our neighbors are, but we're going to have to sort of humble ourselves a little bit and be more willing to help our neighbors. And as Jesus said, you help those who are of the mammon of unrighteousness, and when you get cast out, they'll receive you. In other words, there'll come a time where you may get more sympathy from the world than you would necessarily from your own people. So we are entering what I would describe, what Jesus would describe as the growing pains, all right, the birthing pains. And the birth pains intensify, and there's shorter contractions, shorter time between contractions, and it just gets more and more intense until finally the child is born. And so we're going to have less time to catch our breath. We're going to have one crisis precipitate another crisis, And one of the biggest crises we're going to be facing in the near future is food shortage. Now, I mentioned last time that the fertilizers are a big issue in North America. In fact, in a lot of cases, they're 300% what they were just 2 years ago. All right, now, one of the biggest fertilizers is ammonium nitrate. It comes from Russia. You can also get it from the Ukraine. And Russia is withholding exporting to America, which means that the farmers are not planting because it's cost prohibitive. The cost of actually getting the fertilizer is higher than the returns of growing the food. And so in those situations, what it means is the farmers think to themselves, what's the point of growing food because I can't afford to live. So this is the start of planting season. Now, the Ukraine is the largest supplier of topsoil around the world. It's also supplies many different oils and natural resources. And one of the things that's happening right now with all the mass immigration that's taking place is that the people are not farming. And so millions of people have left the Ukraine already. And it's not one of the highest populated countries of the world, but it is one of the highest suppliers of agriculture in the world. And so that means that if you have farmers in the Ukraine and you have people in Russia that are growing and not exporting it to the West, and in particularly the countries that would be affected the most would be Africa and also a lot of the Middle Eastern countries and Europe. Those countries are going to be greatly affected by especially through wheat. I know that dairy products have gone up tremendously as well. Just in Iowa, just the last few days, they killed 5 million chickens because of fear of getting a virus. And one chicken produces about 96,000 calories in the form of eggs every year. So you can imagine what the fallout of that's going to be. And then the cattle, if the cattle can't get grains, they die. If they die, they don't produce, all your products, milk, cheese, eggs, and so on get affected. Now, just lately, there's been some restrictions and also some trouble in getting supplies of infant formula. So Walgreens, for example, is running out of stock of infant formula. And this will have serious repercussions also upon the children that maybe cannot breastfeed. So it's really, really important that right now in this little window of time that we start looking at getting supplies. Now, I just heard it said actually this morning by one of the farmers that don't be surprised if 12 months time, you'll have to add an extra $1,000 a month to your grocery bill. Now, this can definitely happen, and it has happened in the past. So when you print money incessantly, it's called inflation. All right, we have the Federal Reserve that has the ability that no one else has to print money, and money that doesn't have any work behind it or any assets behind it. What it does, it depreciates the actual money that you own. It's a form of robbery, but it's legalized robbery. And so that means that your dollar is eroding every day it's in the bank. And so commodities such as food are going to be more valuable than, even real estate and clothes and everything else that you can think of. So this is going to cause serious problem. Now, we can be in a situation in the near future where rationings do start in the food industry, in the supermarkets. Now, there's only about 6 corporations that own the whole food supply in North America. There's also 4 major industries that own most of the seeds that are sold in the world. And so I'd recommend that you start collecting seeds, all right? Just get some heirloom seeds, because heirloom seeds you can reproduce. Don't get the hybrids, because once they're gone, you won't be able to reproduce them. So it's going to be important. Seeds could go out of stock. This may sound extremely far-fetched, but this could definitely happen in the future. when people get in a panic, even if there's enough food supply, but someone yells out that there's going to be a shortage in food supply, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when the president of the United States gets in front of major news networks and tells the American public, we are going to have a food shortage, you better believe we're going to have a food shortage. And so the blame's going to be on Russia, but Russia is not going to be the cause of the food shortage. We have enough supplies in America. If we don't restrict our farmers, and if we just let people alone without regulating them, we have more than enough food to not only feed ourselves, but feed many, many countries. So it's going to cause a chain reaction, a cascading effect. It's going to go from one country to another country to another country. Now, what happens in this situation, if you're in a country where there's a food shortage, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to move. So this is going to cause mass immigration. So Europe, we've already seen mass immigration in Europe from various countries in Africa. We see mass migration from South America into America. We've seen a lot of the Muslim countries immigrating. We've seen places like France become like the Middle East, with their population. So we're going to continue to see more and more of this. And so it's going to put pressure on these first world countries. They will be overwhelmed to the point they will not be able to bail people out. So we're going to have to be completely self-sustainable. And you may not be self-sustainable, and you may not be in a position right now to get self-sustainable. But what I'd recommend is you just take some steps, right? So, it may only be baby steps, but, it's just working with what you have. Now, I'll tell you a story that happened to me. I was in the Philippines several years ago, and I was there when a hurricane came through. It's called Yolanda. It was the world's worst storm. It was a Category 6 hurricane. It was 195-mile-an-hour winds. And so I remember going to the internet one day. I was looking at the news, and I read about this massive hurricane, 500 miles across. And I thought to myself, poor people, they're going to get hit. They are going to get hit by this hurricane. And I kept reading, and it was coming straight for me. And so I sent out a quick email to my friends back home and said, please pray for us. We're going to get hit by this giant hurricane. And so I went to the supermarket. I got food. It was like nothing was a problem. Everyone was acting normal. And the Lord impressed me. This is what it's going to be like in the last days. There's a hurricane coming, and people are oblivious to what's going on. Well, I went back home. We hunkered down. I didn't have a lot of supplies. We thank the Lord. We didn't get hit by the strongest part of the hurricane. We didn't get the eye hit us. We just got the side of it hit us. We had a lot of rain. We had a lot of wind, but things were devastated. There was 10,000 people that died as a result of that storm. And I remember getting down to one glass of water. Now, we had a 6-month-old baby. We had a 4-year-old son, and the banks were closed. Our food was running out, and we were down to one glass of water, and the shops were shut, and you couldn't get any telecommunication out. And so the people back home didn't hear from us. They thought we had died. And so anyway, I went out that day looking for water. I couldn't find any water. I came back home, and the Lord spoke to me and said, your bread and water shall be sure. And so and the devil told me too, the Lord has left you. That's what he told me. But I couldn't go there. I couldn't afford to go there in my mind, and I just kept holding on to that promise, my bread and water shall be sure. So I went home, and I thought, Lord, what am I going to do? Do I just put a basin out and pray for rain? Because by this time the rain had gone. And anyway, at that time, what I was thinking about it, this man showed up on a tricycle with 4 or 5 gallon containers of water, dropped them off at our house, and went back. Now, this was a impassable road. You couldn't even get a 4-wheel drive because of the rain that had completely destroyed our road. But this guy just showed up on a tricycle out of nowhere and dropped off 4 or 5 gallon containers of water, which was just enough for us to last 2 weeks in order to make it through this crisis. So the reason I'm bringing that up to you is because, we may be in situations we get caught off guard, or we're in a crisis. It doesn't mean God had left us, right? It doesn't mean that, oh, well, we made a mistake, therefore we're wiped off now. No, God will make a way in our extremity. But let me tell you this, it was very stressful going through that process. But if I had the supplies ahead of time, I wouldn't have gone through that trial. But now I have a testimony. The point I'm trying to make is that, we've got to trust the Lord whether we're prepared or we're not prepared, right? That's the takeaway. If we're not prepared, God will still provide a way. But it's better if you're prepared, because then you don't have to go through that stress. And secondly, you're in a position whereby you can help other people, right? So I don't want anyone to think that, well, I'm trapped. I'm in this bad situation. God can't help. Remember Elijah, he was fed with ravens, right? I'm sure that bread came from the king's table. So, God always makes a way for his children. But it does say in Hebrews that in chapter 11, Noah prepared an ark. And Jesus was constantly saying, be you ready, right? He used different wording, be you ready. And I think the most important thing is to be spiritually ready, that we know that everything is right with God. We don't have anything against someone. We have a pure conscience. We can, God can safely take us where he wants to take us. And so that's the most important thing.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, clicking the bell icon so you're notified whenever we upload.